Hey everyone, Tactics here with another patch 9.1 update, and man, do we have some interesting things to talk about this week, including the AMZ Nerf, a reroll system for Mythic Plus keys, the gem set bonuses for the raid, and much more. Remember though, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to be notified when I post more Warcraft content, and let's just get started with the changes to AMZ. They did what a lot of people were asking for initially, which is a cooldown increase from 2 to 3 minutes. There was also a duration decrease, so it used to last 10 seconds and now lasts 8. And that's kind of where I was putting my thoughts. I think that should be the nerf with maybe a reduction from like 20 to 15% magic damage reduction on the ability. Now, what they opted to do instead is they did implement that absorb cap that they've been talking about, which isn't the greatest nerf, but we'll talk about that a little bit. So basically what the current absorb cap is on this ability is the DK's health times 1 plus their versatility percent. So if a DK has let's say 40k health and they have 25% versatility, not something a DPS DK is going to have, but let's use that as an example. That means they're going to have a 40k shield times 1.25 because of their 25% versatility, so they're going to have a 50k HP shield. Now, this is not going to do too much against like consistent magic damage, right? So like the uses in the Nathrius fight, for example, it's going to be very bad in that situation. But what it does do is it differentiates it from darkness. Right, so now darkness has that you want to use this on small repeated hits, like in the Nathrius, whereas AMZ is now you want to use this against big hits, singular big hits, because if it works anything like how it used to work, the previous iteration of AMZ that had the absorb cap, is that the hit that eliminates the shield, so the hit that goes over the cap, will still get the damage reduction. So something like the crystallized soaks on Stone Legion Generals, you'll still be able to use AMZ the exact same way because that's a one singular big hit that you're using AMZ for, and it's still going to get the full value from it. That's how it used to work. That's how we assume it still works. Obviously, it's going to need some testing, but if it works like that, that's basically just differentiating the uses of AMZ and darkness. And of course, that 3-minute cooldown was absolutely necessary. 100% needed. Now, the other thing this does, though, is this puts a big discrepancy between the use of AMZ from a DPS DK versus AMZ from a blood DK. Because, of course, blood DKs have already a higher base health. They have vampiric blood, which they would probably always overlap with their use of their AMZ to pump their health up. And, of course, like I mentioned, they're much more likely to have that 25% versatility number, whereas the DPS DKs are much more likely to have something more in like the sub 10% range, right? So not only they have more max health and a way to boost their max health over a short window, they also have that higher versatility multiplier. So things like it's very easy to get their AMZ up to over 100k absorb cap, making it very similar to what the current AMZ iteration is, just on a 3-minute cooldown lasting 8 seconds. So like if you have a blood DK, you can now do the exact same things you were doing with AMZ, like on Denathrius, where you're using it to protect against all those little ad hits. So that's something you can still do. It's still a little bit weaker, but it's very close to the same thing. So it puts that little change between what is an Unholy Death Knight AMZ versus a Blood Death Knight AMZ. So it gives Blood DKs a little something, and they definitely needed a little bit of a boost, though I'm not sure this is going to be enough, seeing as you're probably now just going to see AMZ being used on singular big hits, like something on Kel'Thuzad, for example, has those singular big frost hits on that you need to soak or immunity, and a boss like Guardian of the First Ones has those ramping up hits where he does a bunch of them, where the old AMZ was very good because you could have the duration last long enough to eat 3 hits, but this new AMZ is only going to be able to eat 1 hit. So it's going to be better, or it's going to be the same in some situations, and it's going to be worse in others, is basically what this is. In those situations, is it going to be better? Moving on from AMZ, though, we have Mistweaver Monks. They got a decent damage buff, honestly. 10% to a bunch of abilities, 20% spinning crane kick, From there, they also saw another very small mana reduction. I think it's about what 6-7% mana reduction on enveloping mists. And then they actually saw a change to revival. So revival at level 56, so at max even, it'll be rolled in with their mastery, Gust of Mist. So it'll now proc their mastery, and to compensate for that big healing increase to revival, they gave it a flat 10% healing reduction. But this is a net increase to revival. Revival gonna need a bit more testing, but that's going to be a pretty substantial, just press the button, heal people up. So that's definitely a good change. I think revival definitely needs to be, it needs to be different, right? It needs to do something. It's a single hit, so it's either got to be like an insane heal, or it's got to do something, because right now in its current state, it's just not really healing for a ton. You notice it, but it's not super noticeable, right? Like a Trank, for example, a full channeled Trank does a ton of healing. A single tick of revival is really not that much. So it definitely needs a little bit of a something. I'm not sure if this is going to be enough to make them feel different, right? So this damage is a thing. If this damage is enough to bring them up to a decent damage number, because right now their damage number is not great. Fist weaving is something I think is really cool, and I really want that to be brought back as a playstyle that's viable and strong even. I don't know if this is enough to bring it back, because I know right now I believe it's what their it's healing based off their damage, I believe, is that legendary, but we'll have to see how this shapes up. I don't know if this is enough for Mistweavers to make that playstyle anyway be the viable one, because that's the one I really like. Paladins, they saw a change to their inflorescence of the Sunwell legendary. It now gives Holy Light a 30% chance to generate 2 holy power when it consumes Infusion of Light. So that's a legendary no one was really using. So changing that up a bit. The Affliction Conduit was nerfed yet again. So this is the second nerf. It's been cut in half again. So it's now 10% more damage to Shadow Bolt and 5% to Drain Soul per damage over time effect on your target. This is probably the last nerf to it, my thought. It's in an okay spot now. It's still a pretty solid damage increase. But yeah, Affliction single target's now not super great anymore. With this Conduit, it was absolutely insane carrying their single target damage. Now their single target damage is kind of back where it used to be. It's a little bit better, but it's still not super great. But that's what Demo's for. They also buffed Shadowburn here. This talent was pretty much never used, is my understanding. So it's pretty good for killing targets that die quickly. And it gets a damage increase there. So it'd be good for something like Explosive Weeks, give Warlocks a tool for that. But yeah, not too much to talk about there. This talent really isn't used too much, and it probably still won't be used. It's probably going to be a little bit niche. Let's talk about the Mythic Plus Keystone Reroll system. So, first off, there's this guy, Toss-Up, in the Halls of Holding, so where you pick up your stuff in the Great Vault. That will give you a Keystone if you don't have a Keystone, as long as you've completed one Mythic Plus dungeon in the season. So basically, this guy is going to be there. If you didn't do Mythic Plus the week before, don't need to worry. You don't need to do a Mythic 0 to get a key, or someone else's key to get your key. You can just go talk to this guy. He'll give you a key. The other thing this does is, if you, for whatever reason, you don't want to pull whatever is in your vault immediately, you want to wait a couple days to figure it out, or sim or whatever, you can just go and get your key right away from this guy, and you don't need to wait for your Great Vault to get your key. So just a nice little quality of life change there. This here is the interesting one, though. The same guy will now appear at the end of Mythic Plus dungeons that are completed in time, so you do have to time the dungeon. He will offer a one-time Keystone exchange to any player whose current Keystone is at or below the level of the dungeon that was recently completed. So if you just completed a 20, you can then re-roll any keys that are 20 or below. So 19, 18, anything. Keystones that are a higher level than the dungeon cannot be traded in, so anything 21 or above, including the Keystone that you just used to start this run. Obviously, that's going to be a 21 key now, so you can't re-roll it here. Now, the wording here is a little bit ambiguous, so we aren't fully sure what this means by one-time Keystone exchange. For example, does that mean that only one player can re-roll their key once? Does this mean every player in the party, except the person that started the key, obviously, can re-roll their key once? Or does this mean that every player in the party can reroll their key a total of once all week, right? So that's the distinction. Is it once per run? Is it once per week? Or is it one person per run, right? So there's a lot of different interpretations of this because of how the ambiguous the wording is. So we'll just have to wait to see how it turns out. Obviously, some of those situations are much better than others, like once per run. That's a much better situation than once per week. But in general, I mean, anything is better than the current system, and there's obviously the entire system changes that could be done to the current key system, but this at least is a very welcome change that I'm sure a lot of players, even in set 5-man groups, will be happy to have, regardless of whether it's the one per week or one per dungeon. Next, we do have the Shards of Domination system. So this was that gem system that I've talked about a couple times now that was only partially implemented. Basically, they drop in the raid. You can now upgrade them up to 5 ranks with this currency that drops in the bosses, and you'll socket them in your gear. You'll have 5 sockets in your gear. There's 3 different types of shards: Blood, Frost, and Unholy. And if you have 3 of one type, you'll get a set bonus that is only active in the raid, in the maw, and in Torghast. So not active in dungeons, not active in PvP, but the gems themselves are. So let's take a look at those shards themselves. So what these actually are, Shards of Domination. So for the blood shards, there's currently 3 of each. There's 4 categories right now: offensive, healing, defensive, and tertiary. There's currently only 3 active for each. So my assumption is there's going to be 4 gems for each. An offensive, a healing, a tertiary, a defensive. They're just not all in yet. But what we do have, let's look at. So we have the offensive blood shard. Your damage increased by 2% when you have 50% or more health than your target. So that's going to be a good execute damage shard, basically. That's what this does. And again, it has 5 ranks. You can upgrade it by killing bosses in the raid. The healing one increases your healing received and your max health by some number. This is obviously a placeholder still. And then the tertiary one for blood increases your leech by some number. Again, placeholder, not in yet. And then we don't have the defensive one for blood. For frost, your damage increased by 3% for 20 seconds after attacking an enemy you have not yet damaged. So first strike 2.0. I guess 3.0 if you count the Bonesmith one as 2.0. But yeah, another basically first strike-esque type thing. It's going to be very, very strong in Mythic Plus for sure. Because again, these gems do work in all forms of content. It is their set bonus, which I'll talk about later, that only works in the raid, in the maw, and Torghast. For frost healing, critical heals put an absorb on the target for 6 seconds. For defensive, when you stand still, you gain an absorb shield at every 5 seconds up to a cap. No tertiary for frost, though based on this tertiary and the tertiary for unholy, it's as likely to be an avoidance tertiary. Unholy offensive, when you damage a target, it increases your damage done to that specific target by 0.33% right now for 4 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. So you just stack up this damage increase and you'll get, at the max level is 1.5% right now. We'll see what sticks. Unholy healing, your helpful spells and abilities have a chance to grant your target an aura, draining 221 health currently from nearby enemies every 2 seconds for 10 seconds. That's probably going to be a very, very good one for healers, at least definitely in Mythic Plus, maybe in Rage as well, because it's basically you heal people and they deal damage. So that's a pretty good one for healers. And the tertiary here is speed. Again, placeholder number, so no defensive one here as of yet. We then go look at these set bonuses. A reminder, again, those gems active everywhere. No matter where you go, these bonuses are always active. These bonuses only active when you have 3 of a gem, and then even then they are only active in the raid, in the maw, and Torghast. I want to make sure that's known. These aren't active everywhere. No PvP, no Mythic Plus, just the raid. So the blood 3 set, when you're inside the maw and Torghast, damaging an enemy establishes a link. This link pulses every 3 seconds, dealing some placeholder amount of shadow damage and healing you for the damage dealt. If it would overheal you, it instead heals a nearby ally, and you can only have 1 link active at a time. The Frost set bonus, again, while inside the maw and Torghast, each time you deal a crit, the winds accumulate 6% of that effect up to a cap of whatever per crit. Every 20 seconds, the winds unleash, dealing frost damage equal to the total accumulation, and the surrounding you in winds for 20 seconds, absorbing 100% of the damage dealt by the winds. So this I can see this being a very, very strong, especially for classes stacking crit. Just getting a big absorb shield on you, even if it's a medium absorb shield on you every 20 seconds, it's going to be very, very valuable. I don't know exactly on the acquisition of these stones if you're going to be able to get this for the world first race, but any kind of absorb cap you can put on yourself in that race, because absorb is just so strong when you're under geared facing these bosses. This is going to be very, very strong if they can get their hands on this. On Holy, finally, while inside the Monarch Torghast, your spells and abilities have a chance to drain a soul fragment from your target, granting 10 primary stat for 30 seconds and stacking up to 15 times. When you reach these 15 stacks, you'll unleash Chaos Bane, dealing some shadow damage split between all nearby enemies and granting you 300 primary stat for 15 seconds. And you get about 8 procs per minute increased by haste. So this is another one, very, very powerful effect. Obviously, this shadow damage matters a little bit, but in general, just flat primary stat is great. Right, this is going to be very, very good for a lot of classes as well. So we'll have to see how balancing shakes up, and again, how these extra sockets, if it goes how I expect it to go, there's going to be a defensive and a tertiary socket for all 3 sets, so we'll have to see how those end up shaping up. But in general, I'm not unhappy with the system. These are fairly, I mean, this one in particular is going to be very, very good in Mythic Plus. But outside of this one, they seem to be fairly low-ish impact. Outside of raid, and the big impact ones, looks like they're saving for the set bonus in particular. So we'll have to see how the tuning on these go. But it looks like they're trying to put the majority of the impact into these set bonuses and leave these minor gems with smaller impacts. Just because the gems are active in all forms of content and the set bonuses are active only in raids. And so we'll have to see how that shapes up. But so far, I'm liking how it looks. Looks like a decent system, honestly. From there, I believe the only other thing we had to talk about was the Great Vault. So they have actually now changed the Great Vault system a little bit. When you don't get a gear piece you want, you're now going to get this token currency, and you can then trade in this token currency, and you'll get either Anima, Stygia, or Soul Ash, whatever you want. So it just gives you a little bit more choice there. Still feels bad when you don't get an upgrade, but it feels a little bit less bad at least. We also have some new rune carving powers in the game. Monks got theirs. I think the rogue, shaman, hunters, and priests, or warlocks, sorry, were confirmed, and then priests got a couple reworked. Still waiting on all those to be in, and then I will go over them in a separate video. But that is just about it for the changes this week in the 9.1 PTR. Definitely interested in hearing your guys' thoughts on these changes. Do you think Blizzard went too far with AMZ? Were the Mistweaver buffs enough? How do you like the new reroll system for Mythic Plus and the set bonus system for raids? Let me know down in the comments below, or you can even come stop by my Twitch channel at Tactics and have a chat with me there. That is it for this video, though. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.